They are aggressive, and they live by the blitz.
Back to Goodson, and Goodson down the sideline. Touchdown, Iowa.
That is how it all started. We're recapping Iowa's 34-6 win over Indiana here during Week 172 of Brada's Branded Thoughts. We'll talk about the good, the bad, and the noteworthy from Saturday's win, and we'll look ahead to an historic showdown in Ames, the Cy-Hawk rivalry set to kick off this Saturday. It's all coming up here during Week 172 of Brada's Branded Thoughts. This is from the Hawkeye of the Storm.
Are you a Hawkeye fan living in Story County? Do you feel isolated? Like you're alone in a maze of red? Well, you're not the only one. And that's why we here at StoryCounty.news have launched a brand new section of our website, From the Hawkeye of the Storm, which will feature our weekly podcast, Brada's Branded Thoughts, as well as other Hawkeye-related content for all you Story County residents who bleed black and gold, or if you live in Western Iowa, Eastern Iowa, or somewhere else other than Ames and you're a Hawkeye fan. We'd love your support. All of our content is free, so again, give our Facebook page a follow, give it a like, and give our Twitter page a follow as well, @From the Hawkeye on Twitter. The more likes, the more follows, the more support we get, the more content we can continue to push out, and it's all free. It's From the Hawkeye of the Storm, hosted by StoryCounty.news, for the best Hawkeye content in the area.
Yes, this is Week 172 of Brada's Branded Thoughts. You heard at the outset of our preview that stadium rocking first run by Tyler Goodson, and man alive, I have not heard, and I wasn't even at the game, all right? I wasn't even at the game, and I have not heard Kinnick Stadium rock that loud in quite some time. Obviously, we've been deprived of crowds and full stadiums due to COVID last year. What a run by Tyler Goodson, set up beautifully by Sam Laporte and Luke Lachey. The stretch play worked to perfection against Indiana, and really for the Hoosiers, it was all downhill after that. Indiana just never really got any rhythm offensively, although Iowa's offense did struggle at times. We'll talk about that coming up. Indiana just could never dig in, especially when they did make big plays. They had a couple explosive plays. In the words of our good friend Don Patterson, some super explosive plays, but they were for naught because ultimately Iowa's defense just far too strong. So again, we are talking about Iowa's victory, 34-6 over the Indiana Hoosiers. It's interesting looking back at this game, and of course some of this will be a repeat from what you heard if you listened to Iowa postgame at the Voice of College Football with our good friend and coach Don Patterson on Saturday. But it's interesting, after that Goodson run, you could just feel, obviously the crowd was such a huge factor, but you could just feel the momentum being really clamped down on by Iowa, and we saw it heading into the next drive. I mean, early on in the next drive, Michael Penix kind of fumbling the football and then trying to shovel it almost out of bounds. I thought it could have been a fumble. Don thought it was a clean play by Penix, but certainly a risky play. He basically scooped the ball and kind of, I thought, more tapped it forward. Don kind of described it more as a throw. He had possession of the ball and then was able to throw it past the line of scrimmage, so there was no grounding call, and it was not a fumble. So, but that was an indication early. You could see the crowd, the circumstances were in Michael Penix's head, and I think, too, one thing we have to remember is Michael Penix is coming off a torn ACL. I don't think he looked like he was comfortable. I think a lot of people would say that. Don certainly agreed. He didn't look comfortable in the pocket, and he didn't look comfortable leaving the pocket. And if you have a quarterback who's not comfortable in the pocket or outside the pocket, you have yourself a problem at quarterback. So that was sort of a foreshadowing of things to come. Just one play after that, this happened.
Iowa rushes forward, pass through the hands and intercepted. Matthews couldn't hold it in, and it turns into a pick six. Riley Moss.
telling you, just listen to that crowd. I mean, just it's so great to have fans back. Obviously, we want fans to be safe. Hopefully, most were vaccinated at the game. But again, it was just great to hear a crowded stadium and Kinnick rocking. It was great to see the first quarter wave. And again, at this point in the game, you're up 14-0. You just knew that Penix and this Indiana Hoosier offense, as explosive as we know it can be, they just were not going to have enough in the tank to overcome what was a dominant performance by this Iowa defense. And let's not forget Riley Moss with a second pick six later in the game where he just completely jumped the route on Penix. And, a tremendous day for Riley. He has turned into a bit of a ball hawk for Iowa, I think, back to last year against Minnesota. A big interception in that game. Of course, he had a pick six against Michigan State. He's played actually traditionally well, historically well, against Minnesota in past seasons. And I think Riley is a kid, and we can talk about this obviously at a better time later in the season or even after the season. I think Riley is going to get a good shot at the next level. You look at the history of Phil Parker and his studs at defensive back. I think he's got an excellent opportunity to make it in the next level. And you don't see too many white cornerbacks. I know that maybe it's not politically correct that I'm bringing that notion up, but how many white cornerbacks do you see in the league nowadays? It's been probably 15, 16 years. If I'm thinking of the right guy, I've got his face in my head. I can't think of his name. But as far as a white cornerback, so Riley's got an opportunity to change that, and certainly him and Matt Hankins, who should have had an interception had it not been for a bit of a phantom quarterback, inexcusable hit, if you will, I guess from the ref's point of view on John Wagner. They called the roughing the passer on John. A bit ticky-tacky. Don Patterson kind of felt that was an acting job by Michael Penix, and maybe it was. I thought it was a late hit on John Wagner, as the refs did. It wasn't an egregious hit, but it certainly was late. Dane Belton also had an interception in this game. I thought he looked terrific. We talked on Saturday with Don Patterson about the performances from Iowa's top three linebackers, and I said it going into the season that this linebacking core, I believe, is the best linebacking core, and I know that's probably jumping the gun, but I think this is the best linebacking core we've seen since the Josie Jewell, Bo Bauer, and Ben Neiman year. All right? You've got Seth Benson, who's healthy now. You've got Jack Campbell, who's healthy. And you've got a Justin Jacobs, who, remember, he was the highest touted kid of this group. This is a really, really stout defense. That goes without saying. The linebacking core is strong and youthful, but, again, strong. And I think they are wise, football-wise, beyond their years. You look at the secondary for Iowa. We mentioned Hankins and Moss. We mentioned Dane Belton, who can play cash, who is playing cash, but also can slide back to safety. And Jack Kerner almost had a pick on Saturday as well. Kayvon Merriweather, seems like he's really coming into his own at safety as well. And heard nothing but good things about Terry Roberts and Jamari Harris. Obviously, we haven't seen a lot of those guys because when Iowa goes to more of a nickel set to where they used to send in maybe a third cornerback, you're going to see more of Dane Belton. I still think there are times when it would be wise for Iowa to deploy a Terry Roberts, Jamari Harris, if need be. We saw a time or two where Iowa got isolated. Freifogel, the star tight end for Indiana, got isolated on an Iowa linebacker. That's not a good thing, especially when it's not Justin Jacobs. And so that's something that I would like to see from Phil Parker, but boy, you can't really nitpick too much from this performance from the Iowa defense. Let's take a look at the good, the bad, and then we'll take a look at just some noteworthy points as we head into what is going to be a rocking atmosphere. There's no question about it in Jack Trice Stadium here in Ames this coming Saturday. So let's take a look, first of all, at some of our good from Saturday's win. First of all, there's a lot to talk about when you win 34-6 over the number 17 Hoosiers, but the good, my first point on the list, is Spencer Petras did not turn the ball over. We'll get to some of the frustrations with Spencer. You can revisit our conversation with Don Patterson over at the Iowa at the Voice of College Football channel on YouTube. But let's save that for a moment. Let's talk about Petras playing clean. Didn't force any passes. There really weren't any dropped interceptions from Indiana. I thought Spencer was fairly conservative. You could call it a vanilla play calling day. I thought there were opportunities for Spencer to get the ball downfield. Don, of course, was at the game, and he was able to see sort of the entire frame of things. It's harder to see when you're at home. I mean, any casual fan or a serious fan who's watching from their big screen really can't see what's going on down the field. So, according to Don, there were receivers open at times. He still believes that receiver selection is a work in progress. I would agree with that. Again, I'm no expert given the fact that I can't see what's going on down the field at a game like this past Saturday, but certainly Spencer played clean. He did not force anything. I thought he was more accurate. Don didn't really see that. I thought Spencer was more accurate than we're accustomed to seeing. I think Spencer, and this is, I know some fans may not agree with this. I think Spencer is inherently more accurate than a Nate Stanley. I know we shouldn't be playing the comparative game because they're two different quarterbacks, and I think a lot of people would take Nate Stanley in a heartbeat right now. But I look at what Spencer Petras brings to the table, and he seems to throw a more accurate ball. I think one way that Nate Stanley really excelled when you compare the two is receiver selection. I think Nate Stanley, for the most part, hit the right guy, and at times, Petras either does not go through his progressions or he goes through his progressions and just misses guys. I think that's improved a little bit, but I still think, I agree with Don, receiver selection is going to be an issue, and once he gets that down, assuming he'll get that down, I think accuracy-wise, he's really improved. I thought he took a little bit of the steam off the ball. Again, Don didn't completely agree with that notion. He thought he was still putting a little bit too much smoke behind the football. At times he was. We think back to the pass to Tyler Goodson, a bit of a wheel right out of the backfield, and just smoked it and went off the fingertips of Tyler Goodson. That was a play I would put on Petras. You got to make that ball catchable. Although I did see a screen play or two where, again, it's a screen pass. You think it's not a hard pass. Well, we saw Spencer miss screen passes. I remember late last road opener against Purdue last year, where Spencer needed to hit his man, Tyler Goodson, or it might have been Mekhi Sargent for a simple screen pass, overthrew him, and that was a crucial error in that game. So that's a good thing. I think Spencer has improved his accuracy. I think he's taking a little bit off the fastball, and he did not turn the ball over. Those are all good things. We'll get to the bad in a second, but those are all good things from the quarterback position. Defense, that's my second good thing to note here from this performance on Saturday. That goes without saying. I think this is kind of stating the obvious, but let's talk about detailed aspects of the defense that I believe are going to pay huge dividends down the road. We talked about the linebackers in the secondary, but specifically the experience at defensive back. Let's remember, here's a guy in Riley Moss who's been around the program 4 years. Here's a guy in Matt Hankins who's been around the program for 5 years. Kayvon Merriweather, this is, I believe, his third year. These guys have all been through a lot with COVID last year, having to adjust on the fly. You've got Jack Kerner, who clearly has become sort of I compare him a little bit to, I don't want to say a poor man's Brett Greenwood, but they play similar. I think they both have a knack for being where the football is. He's a bit undersized, but I think he's really elevated into that role. And the defensive line, one position we haven't really, or position group, I should say, that we really haven't talked about. I thought the defensive line was okay. Early on in the game, they were able to get pressure on Penix. I thought Noah Shannon played really well, big number 99 on the interior of that line. I thought he played really well. We did see about 8 guys rotating over, and maybe I counted wrong, but you got Van Valkenburg, Logan Lee, Y.A. Black, Joe Evans, and then you filter in also John Wagoner, Deontay Craig, probably missing a guy or two in here. Noah Shannon, missed him earlier. And I'm probably missing another one. There were 7 or 8 guys, though, that Iowa was... Lucas Van Ness, that's the other guy, defensive end, I should say, that filtered in for Iowa. And so that's a good sign. I said it preseason. I think rotation, a deep rotation at defensive line is a sign of strength, whereas a deep rotation at offensive line, I believe, is actually a sign of weakness. Now, that could be changed, but that's my take on a Kirk Ferentz-led team. But again, the defense was spectacular. Turnover, obviously Penix threw 3 interceptions. Turnovers were a huge issue for Indiana. But if Iowa can force turnovers like this, If they can force turnovers the way they did Saturday, they're not going to lose. I mean, they're just not going to lose to anybody. Do I think that's going to happen? No. But that's how impressive Iowa was, and that's how crucial turnovers are to the outcome of game. Just ask analytics guru Don Patterson. Let's talk about our third good thing that came out of Saturday. Special teams was near perfect. 2 for 2 for Caleb Shudak kicking the football. We expected that. We've heard nothing but good things about Caleb. I mean, he booted his kicks into the end zone. He was kicking off from both directions. Caleb looks really locked in right now, and I think he is going to be just as good, if not better, than Keith Duncan was these last couple of years. And credit to Caleb. This guy stuck around this program. He probably could have went somewhere else and started right away. He's a kid with a big leg, and if he has a good season, he's going to have a shot at the next level as well. If you can kick the ball over 50 yards and be accurate inside of 40, I think you have a good shot at kicking at the next level. You look at a guy like Keith Duncan, very solid kicker at Iowa, struggle with the long ball. You look at a guy like Marshall Kane, big legs, struggle with the kind of the mid-range kicks, and even we saw him miss some PATs at times. But you look at a guy like Nate Kading, could do it all. I'm not comparing him to Nate yet. We've seen a small sample size, but Caleb Shudak was impressive. Torrey Taylor, I give a lot of credit to Torrey. You really saw him working on the traditional punt. Of course, he's more of a traditional rugby-style kicker because of his background in Australia. But Torrey, I thought, really kicked the ball well, and he was so close to getting the ball, pinning the ball inside the 5. I mean, he was so close several different times compared to the Indiana punter that really struggled. So, again, no complaints there. Charlie Jones, right off the bat, returning the opening kickoff to about the 35-yard line. You can tell punt return, he's going to be obviously elite. But he showed, kickoffs are a different story. You can ask any special teams coordinator or anybody who's returned kickoffs or returned punts. It's a different animal. The two positions are totally separate, but Charlie, surely, we can tell he's got a knack for both positions. Charlie did go down with an injury late in the game, was sort of gimping on one of his knees. It did not look good, and we're recording this on Tuesday. Kirk Ferentz stated today during his weekly press conference that Charlie's practicing. So that's shocking to me, honestly. When I saw the injury, that it didn't look good. But boy, that sounds like a very surprising but satisfying development in Iowa City. So again, Petrus played clean. The defense was spectacular, obviously, and special teams was perfect. Let's talk about some of the concerns, or as I should say, the bad that came out of Saturday's game. The offense sputtered. I know they scored 34 points, but again, we know that 2 of them were off of pick sixes from Riley Moss. There's your 14 points. You've got 2 field goals from Shudak. Okay, there's 20 points. And you've got 1 long run from Tyler Goodson right off the bat. Now, you can't take those plays away. You can't take the Goodson play away. But again, can you rely on that week after week? You just can't expect to be able to hit 56, 58-yard runs every week. This team's going to have to chip away sort of like they did last season and open up holes. The offensive line was good at times, but again, at times there wasn't any space for Ivory Kelly Martin. Iowa had too many negative runs. There were some positive things. I thought Kelly Martin actually ran the ball strong, but consistency up front is going to be a key moving forward. We know that. And that was one of my concerns heading into this game because Kirk Ferentz had stated earlier in the week that he expected to rotate so many guys in at offensive line, and that's exactly what he did. I had stated earlier last week during a live segment with Mark Rogers and Jim Coyle of Indiana Radio that I believed Mason Richmond would start at left tackle. That's nothing that I just magically came up with, but have heard great things about Richmond. Our good friend Tom Kakert over at HawkeyeReport.com said the same thing earlier in the year, that he thought Mason Richmond was really coming on strong. And sure enough, Mason started at left tackle and basically stayed there. We saw a little bit of Jack Plummet left. We saw a little bit of Jack Plummet right. Of course, Kyler Schott did not play in this game. And honestly, that left side of that line was okay. I think it was probably better than the right side, but overall, I think collectively they have room for improvement. But Mason is the guy right now at left tackle. Justin Britt played, I think, pretty well. Tyler Linderbaum left the game briefly, but I don't think he actually missed any offensive snaps. It was on a touchdown run where he left the game. He got banged up with, I believe it was a helmet to his leg helmet from his quarterback, Spencer Petras, on the designed quarterback run. But overall, offensive line played okay. Nick DeYoung, he's going to have to get more snaps under him at right tackle. You want Kyler Schott back. I think Kyler Schott would really help this team right now. But it's giving these guys an opportunity to actually get snaps under their belt. Connor Colby's another guy that got some time. We even saw Michael Myslinski late in the game. So some guys are getting opportunities right now. You just hope that they can continue to develop, and they will with George Barnett and certainly Kirk Ferentz at the helm there. The second concern, or the second bad, that we saw from Saturday's game, and I hate to say I told you so, and I'm not saying that this is exactly the reason why it happened, but as you'll recall, in some of our pregame conversations, or our preseason conversations, one of the big concerns, and you can look back, week 170 of Brada's Branded Thoughts, one of my big concerns was the fact that Kirk Ferentz traditionally, and he followed that same trend this year, does not allow his running backs to get hit very much in fall camp. I understand the reasoning. You want to keep your guys healthy, especially when you don't have a ton of depth at running back, although I've heard more good things about depth at that position. Here's what Kirk Ferentz, though, said after Iowa's 2 fumbles from their 2 primary ball handlers on Saturday.
We had 2 fumbles today, right, and that's not good. But Ivory's been out for a while, so I think that's probably part of it. And we're pretty careful about tackling experienced guys in practice during scrimmages. We don't tackle a lot live anyway, so I guess you got to live with that. We had 2 last year on our opener too.
So maybe there was something to the reasoning that perhaps it can hurt you early in the season when you don't let your running backs take hits. And Kirk kind of alluded to that. Now, hopefully, Tyler and Ivory got those fumbles out of their system. But again, we saw this exact same thing happen a year ago at Purdue, and it killed Iowa. All right? Goodson, Mekhi Sargent, both had fumbles week 1, and they lose to Purdue. So maybe you want to look at that. I'm not telling Kirk Ferentz to change that model, but it's certainly something I'm sure Kirk and his staff will look at moving forward. Again, I get it. It's a fine line to dance. It's a tight rope to balance. But is it a coincidence that we've seen multiple fumbles in each of the 2 openers for Iowa these past 2 seasons? Something to think about. But again, hopefully both of those guys, who are typically very sure-handed ball carriers, got those out of their systems. The third bad, and this isn't something that happened during the game that alarmed me, but it's just the simple fact that Iowa cannot expect or rely on the number of turnovers they got in this game. All right? I would even venture to say against Iowa State this week, I will be shocked if Iowa State gives the ball away 3 times, especially from Brock Purdy. Now, can Iowa's secondary force lots of turnovers this season? Absolutely. And they're going to need to, especially if we don't see marked improvement from Spencer Petras in the passing game. But you just cannot rely on 2 pick sixes from Riley Moss. And what a catch by Dane. I keep going back to that Dane Belton catch. What a catch. Looked like a receiver out there on his interception. But Iowa's going to have to figure out a way to obviously gain consistency on the ground. They're going to have to figure out a way to get the ball downfield. Not enough touches for Tyrone Tracy. Don Patterson brought that up after the game as well. Just not enough touches for him. He's explosive. You got to get him the ball. Sam Laporte looked good. Luke Lachey got his first catch. That was nice to see. Reganey got some catches, but Tracy needs more touches, and I think that will happen moving forward. Let's transition now to some noteworthy things that I kind of picked out of the game on Saturday that will kind of apply to this Saturday's game against Iowa State. First of all, as we kind of toss in the Iowa State win over UNI as sort of our pregame buildup here, the matchup of Goodson Hall, and this is certainly not a surprise to anyone, and Saturday's game, the burst we saw from Tyler Goodson on that 56-yard scamper, that is not like that's just breaking news or earth-shattering. We knew Goodson was capable of that, but it was a good reminder to me that the running back matchup this Saturday in Ames is going to be awesome, all right? If you're an Iowa fan, you're an Iowa State fan, let's just enjoy the week because there is going to be an excellent opportunity for both of these running backs to have, I don't want to say Heisman moments, but certainly Doak Walker Award moments this Saturday. These are the types of games where you earn those types of awards. And certainly both guys are fighting for their teams right now, but Hall versus Goodson going to be impressive. Laporte looked great Saturday, and that leads me into another positional matchup this coming Saturday, and that is Charlie Kollar of Iowa State versus Sam Laporte. Now, of course, these guys aren't matching up head-to-head, just like Hall and Goodson aren't matching up head-to-head. But again, what a matchup as far as positions. You've got an elite tight end who's probably a first-team All-American in Charlie Kollar. Of course, he was an All-American last year versus a guy who I think can be a future first or second round draft pick in Sam Laporte. Tight end U versus maybe the best tight end in the country in Kollar. And how about this one? The struggles from Petrus, but the inherent struggles from Purdy during Iowa State-Iowa games. That matchup, the quarterback position, going to be fascinating. Obviously, Petrus has never played on the road during home games. Now, something to sort of credit Spencer with, this was his first game in front of any crowd on Saturday, and I thought he did, again, not saying he played perfect. The offense still struggled. We'll get to that here at the end as far as my keys moving forward for this team. But Petrus did look comfortable. I thought for the most part he looked comfortable. He didn't look as nervous like he did last year. So Purdy versus Petrus in a rocking Jack Trice Stadium will be fascinating. And how about this matchup? Mike Rose, who is maybe the best linebacker in the country, versus Iowa's linebacking core, which I think is going to go down as one of, if not the best linebacking cores in the Big Ten, and maybe nationally. I mean, I'm telling you, Justin Jacobs, Seth Benson, Jack Campbell, these guys are ridiculous. They're going to all three of them have an excellent shot at being, and again, next level type linebackers. I don't want to toss around that term too loosely, but this linebacking core is really good right now. And I see this being a low-scoring game on Saturday. Again, Iowa State has the ability to hit big plays. We know Iowa does because they hit one on Saturday, right, with Goodson. As far as keys to the game, I want to go back to what we saw Saturday. Spencer Petrus, again, struggled through, I think, some progressions. He really didn't show any ability to hit big plays. But remember the last road game for Iowa. It was Iowa at Illinois late last season, and through the first half, Petrus was terrible. Comes out in the second half and hits some big pass plays. And, of course, he followed that up with some big touchdowns to Amir Smith-Marset in the game against Wisconsin. So, keys to this game this Saturday. Two things, and, of course, this isn't stating the obvious. Big plays, you want to limit big plays for Iowa State. If you're Iowa, can you hit one? Can you hit one or two? Certainly, and I don't mean plays of over 20, 30 yards. I'm talking super explosive plays of 40, 50 yards plus. It's hard to do, but if you can hit one or two on the road, they're crowd silencers and certainly would give a lot of confidence to Spencer Petrus in this offense, even if it is from the running game. And the other thing in this game that I want to watch for specifically is just turnovers. I mean, that's sort of a stating the obvious type of key. But if you look at this game historically, look at the last time these two teams met, the Iowa State player running into his own teammate on a punt return, and that sealed the deal. Turnovers are huge. We know that. Remember the Jaimin Colbert forced fumble on Brock Purdy that game. That was huge. Turnovers always play a big role in games, and as we saw from Iowa's defense, we hope not, but we could foresee a situation where Iowa becomes somewhat reliant on turnovers. You don't want to see that because you want your offense to be able to keep up. But I think turnovers will be huge. And one other thing I didn't mention earlier, and I don't want to forget about this before we log off here, Iowa really impressed as far as the turnovers are concerned. I want to take a look at the numbers from this past Saturday. Now listen to this. Iowa versus Indiana. Iowa had 2 penalties for 20 yards. If you recall, the opener last season on the road at Purdue for Iowa, 10 penalties for 100 yards. So that's a tremendous development as far as comparing the 2 years. Now, different type of preseason may have something to do with it, but the penalty category will just be huge. Again, it burned them the last time they were on the road, or excuse me, in their last road opener, if you will, against Purdue. You don't want to have the same result against Iowa State. Penalties and turnovers will kill you. So it's going to be a fascinating matchup. ESPN College Game Day will be there this Saturday. There's so much to look forward to. A lot of hype. Iowa is now the number 10 team in the country according to the Associated Press, number 12 according to the coaches poll. Iowa State, they are number 10 according to the coaches poll. I guess I didn't write that down. They're 9 in the AP poll, so it's a top 10 matchup. And probably the best matchup nationally. You do have Oregon, Ohio State. Both those teams kind of struggled at times in their opening week matchup. So I think a lot of the national flavor has now sort of evolved into an Iowa State showdown. So it's going to be a great one. 3:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC at Jack Trice Stadium in Ames. Want to remind everybody, if you didn't catch us last week, head over to Iowa at the Voice of College Football for a live postgame. We're going to do live postgames after every Iowa game this season, but we have Don Patterson, a historic coach. Don Patterson, he was the longtime offensive coordinator with Hayden Fry back in the 90s. He will join us each and every week to talk about Iowa's wins or losses. So again, if you haven't already done so, head over to Iowa at the Voice of College Football on YouTube. It's Iowa at the Voice of College Football on YouTube. Subscribe, turn notifications on. That way you can be there. And certainly you have an opportunity to interact with us by chat. You can even call in, and Don will answer your questions, and we can take your comments. So it's going to be a great season. Iowa is 1-0. Lots of festivities to look forward to this week during Cyhawk Week. We know RVTV from WHO, they are heading to Slater, just south of us here in Ames, I believe tonight. And it's just it's that time of year. And remember, with game day, we announced this quite a while ago that we would be at least covering it in some way or another. We're still kind of ironing out the fine lines of this, but expect an announcement in the coming days of how you can be a part of ESPN College Game Day and the festivities through us from the Hawkeye of the Storm and Mark Rogers at the Voice of College Football. So stay tuned. We're going to give you live coverage from game day. All right? Live coverage from game day. I can tell you that. Stay tuned for more details to come. Thank you for listening to week 172 of Brada's Branded Thoughts here at From the Hawkeye of the Storm. It's Cyhawk Week, Iowa State this Saturday. And with that being said, we are at the end of our show, so let's give our final predictions for this game. I'm going to make a lot of Iowa fans upset with me. If you heard our season predictions, you'll know why I'm making this pick. The 16-10 win over UNI made no difference. It was a vanilla call game from Iowa State. I am going with, regrettably, the Cyclones. All right? I'm going 21-20. Iowa State wins by 1. I don't want it to happen, but that's my pick. So hopefully I'm wrong, and certainly if you disagree or you agree, let us know in the comments. Thanks for listening once again. We will talk to you soon. Iowa State this Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC, and then Iowa postgame at the Voice of College Football. Myself and Don Patterson to break it all down after Saturday's, hopefully, Saturday's win for the Hawkeyes. We'll talk to you soon. Go Hawks.